This is Apple's Mac Mini, Apple's cheapest Mac. It costs only $600 brand new or $500 if you're a student. That's cheaper than their Mac Pro wheels. What a deal. But can a Mac this cheap be any good? Well, let's find out. The Mac Mini is one of the 3 Macs that Apple sells as a standalone unit that does not have a display. That's actually how the Mac Mini and Mac Studio are cheaper than their comparable MacBook brothers and sisters. But you do lose more than just the display with the Mac Mini or Mac Studio. You lose the webcam, the good speakers, the trackpad or mouse, and keyboard. In return, you get a computer that's just an aluminum slab, but with some ports on it. This Mac Mini has Ethernet, Thunderbolt 4 ports, HDMI, 2 USB-A ports, and a headphone jack. The only common port that I believe is missing from the Mac Mini is like an SD card slot. You can see that this M2 chip is normally found on your MacBook Air. It's an absolute bargain then, right? If it's in a form factor like this and costs half as much. That's what I thought too. So I bought the cheapest one off Apple's website just to see if it can replace what I'm currently using, the Mac Studio, with this Apple bargain bin computer. So let's see if I'm wasting my money or if this Mac Mini is more than enough and I've just been buying way too much computer for my own needs. You need to consider adding in the cost of peripherals that you plan to use with this Mac Mini, just like you would with the PC Tower. You could just use what you already own in that old dusty tech bin everyone has somewhere in their house, or you can get the standard Apple keyboard and mouse. The standard Apple keyboard is fine, and the one with Touch ID lets you unlock your Mac with a fingerprint, which is pretty cool, but the mice are not great. I'd recommend against it. I'll list some good Mac peripherals that I personally use in the description if you're interested, but overall, I think Apple's offerings are not necessarily the best options out there for most consumers. The Mac Mini does have a built-in speaker, but it's not good at all. It sounds like you left someone on speakerphone. It gets loud, but not necessarily clear. Get some good external speakers. They're well worth the money, and they sound way better for just a marginal price increase. As for the display, you'll want a nice 4K monitor with good color accuracy, like today's sponsor, BenQ. The BenQ PD2706UA is a 27-inch 4K monitor that covers 95% of the P3 color gamut with a really unique feature, the Ergo arm, which mounts to your desk surface and enables the monitor to fully swivel, be adjusted for height, pivoted, or tilted in any direction. It also doesn't have a stand, meaning you get extra space back on your desk surface where a monitor stand would typically be. The monitor makes a great addition to the Mac Mini as its primary display, or even as an external display for your MacBook with its M color mode. This mode color matches the BenQ display to match your MacBook's display's colors as best as it can. So this works perfect for situations where you want an extra display for your Mac that looks the same as what you see on your MacBook screen. The PD2706UA comes with a USB-C cable that can be used to connect your Mac to the display, the USB ports, and provides power to charge your Mac all at the same time. I really like all the different ports this monitor provides and the cable management raceway that's built directly into the Ergo arm. This has cleaned up my desk significantly. So if you're interested in getting a good quality, color accurate monitor for your Mac, check out the link in the video description below. You'll see shots of this monitor sprinkled throughout this video. And thanks again to BenQ for sponsoring a portion of this video. The Mac Mini is more of a BYOT, bring your own tech type of ordeal. And so if you have existing gear, it is cheap to configure this thing. And if you don't, it's a more expensive computer because you have all these missing parts that you need to purchase. The Mac Mini is just the heart and brain of your computer, and everything else is the limbs and eyes and ears. But when the day comes where you need to surgically remove the Mac Mini out of the mess of cables and place in a new Mac Mini, a Mac Studio or Mac Pro, or even a Windows PC, you don't have to worry about buying new peripherals or replacing all of them like you would if you replaced an all-in-one device like the iMac. The peripherals you reuse or purchase to go alongside your Mac Mini definitely affects your experience using the device tremendously. So if you have bad accessories, your experience is going to be bad. If you have great accessories, your experience is great. With something like a MacBook or an iMac, that's really all decided for you, and they're all pretty decent to great. There's a nice pseudo modularity to the Mac Mini, and that's something you can't really say about a lot of the Apple lineup of products. Of course, that's only in terms of accessories for it. Inside, well, like most Macs, it can't really be upgraded. Okay, so that's all the physical features about the Mac Mini, but how does this tiny computer handle the difficult, brutal, and demanding lifestyle of a casual gamer, casual business user, and YouTube content creator? All right, so let's start off with the casual business user perspective. For YouTube, I keep a ton of documents like scripts, screenshots, video files, and spreadsheets open to manage all of the different things that I do. The M2 Mac Mini handles it all pretty well. There hasn't really been a situation where I experienced slowdowns doing all these different things. But then again, I'm not working with 500 megabyte Excel files, just simple spreadsheets and relatively short documents on Google Drive. So if you're a casual business user, I think this is great for that. Okay, so now let's get a little bit deeper and talk more about how this thing handles more YouTube-y things and not business type stuff, like photo and video editing. If these aren't things that really matter to you, skip ahead. We're getting a little nerdier here in this section. Photo and video editing is a bit more bursty. These tasks push the system, but not all the time. It's kind of like HIIT exercises, something I need to get into, where there will be bursts of a high intensity exercise and short periods of rest in between. So the M2 chip in the Mac Mini is at full load sometimes, and then there's times for it to rest in between. So for these type of tasks, the Mac Mini handles it perfectly fine. I primarily do photo editing just for my YouTube thumbnails, so I work with smaller photos, but I've also played with multiple 61 megapixel raw images that I took during my recent trip to Utah to attend this Sony Kando trip with a bunch of other creators. And with these 61 megapixel raw images, it starts to chug a little, importing them and then even navigating around these images in Affinity Photo, something I never saw on my Mac Studio. Obviously, that is a massive raw file, but not uncommon for pro-level camera bodies, so just be aware there. But for those standard 24 megapixel JPEGs coming out of my A7C, I see no hitches editing those out of Affinity Photo. For video editing, I edit 4K H.264 XAVCS 10-bit 422 footage out of my A7S III. Now, that's a mouthful, so the average person won't know what that means, but this is footage that I take directly from my camera that I'm recording off right here. It handles the compressed codec perfectly fine, even in scenarios where I have 3 to 4 different layers in Final Cut Pro, along with some light color grading across some of these different clips. I know Premiere and DaVinci Resolve are a bit more intensive on Macs, so your mileage may vary on that front since Final Cut Pro was designed by Apple for their machines, but Final Cut Pro at least works the way that I personally expect. Smooth, but intense tasks do take a little longer, and there's some stuttering when I try to do multiple things at once. Lastly, gaming. I've talked a lot about Mac gaming in the past, so I'll just kind of summarize it all here. On Apple Silicon Macs, it hasn't really been good. There's not a lot of support, and games that you can run are limited because developers don't really develop for Apple Silicon Macs. And playing a lot of games, or trying to play a lot of games, require a ton of hacky workarounds when you can have a better experience with less tinkering with an equivalent $500 console or gaming PC. You can play iPhone and iPad games through the App Store, but Macs don't really have touchscreens, and mobile apps are obviously designed for a touchscreen interface. So your experience varies a lot there too. Overall, gaming is possible on the Mac, but actually getting it to play the games you actually want to play is not a fun experience, and it can be done much easier on other non-Mac devices. Apple has recently taken numerous steps to try to improve this aspect of the Mac, like the games porting toolkit, and developers are making some console quality games for the iPhone, which share the same types of chips as the Mac, so maybe this will get better in the future. We've been saying that for a while though, so who knows if that's actually the case. In terms of form factor and how the Mac Mini changes how I use my computer, I ended up relying on this USB-C hub that puts the ports in the front instead of trying to turn the Mac Mini around and playing tug of war with all the different cables that are attached to it. The Mac Mini really needs to adopt front ports like the Mac Studio. The Mac Mini's fan is basically silent, but the Mini does get warm if you really push it. It's so compact that you kind of forget that it's there. It really just stays out of the way. The base model M2 Mac Mini only supports 2 external monitors. If you want more, you'll have to upgrade to the M2 Pro chip, though I'm sure most people will get by fine with just 2 displays with this Mac. So from a value perspective, honestly, I am really impressed with the M2 Mac Mini. This is by far the best value Mac that Apple sells. It makes such a great everyday computer. It makes me really reconsider my Mac Studio purchase solely based on price alone. It can mostly handle all of the things that I usually do. That being said, Apple has made it really expensive to make any kind of upgrade to this thing because none of it is user upgradable. But before you even purchase the Mac Mini, you have to know what kind of specs you want in it so that you can make the decision right there on the spot before purchase. You want more RAM? $200. Want more storage? $200. Want an M2 Pro chip? Pay for both upgrades and pay $300 more. So you either have to be the target demographic for this machine, which to be fair, most users are, or pay a premium to get the specs you actually want. If you absolutely believe that you need to upgrade, get the 16 gigabytes of RAM and buy a large 2 terabyte external SSD. The external SSD will cost way less than paying for Apple's pricing on internal storage. Then you can just plug it in and Velcro that sucker to the Mac Mini until the end of time. So, should you personally consider buying a Mac Mini? Absolutely. This is Apple's cheapest and the best value Mac that they sell. And the performance you get from it is great for your everyday tasks, productivity tasks, streaming content, and light photo and video editing. I also think it makes a great family computer because it's value oriented. And if anything breaks because kids are being kids, you pay a much lower price than if you were getting something like the iMac and it needs repairs. But keep in mind, the moment that you crave something a little bit more performant than this base model, the price starts to add up really quickly. Anyway, what do you personally think? Is the Mac Mini a great deal? Do you think you can get by with just this as your main machine? Why or why not? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you're looking at Macs, I got a bunch of really cool reviews on my channel about most of the Mac lineup at this point. So check them out if you get a chance. Anyway, I'll see you all next time. Bye.